Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast, Is It Worth It?
Hey, everyone.
Today we are diving into what might actually be the ultimate logistical puzzle in Southeast Asia. We really want to answer one very specific question for you guys today. Is it actually worth the immense effort to visit the Batanes Islands?
Yeah, and to get to the bottom of that, we're drawing from a really comprehensive travel briefing. It's titled Batanes, Navigating the Frontier of the Philippines.
Right?
And this document lays out the stark realities, the financial costs, and, the incredible rewards of trying to access a place that honestly actively resists being accessed.
It really does. So our mission for this deep dive into the source materials is to walk you through all of that. The exact daily budgets, the cultural highlights you just cannot find anywhere else, and of course, those hidden logistical traps that routinely destroy people's vacations.
Oh, yeah, the traps are brutal.
They are. But before we get into the spreadsheets and the ferry schedules, you really need to understand the physical reality of where we're talking about. Batanes is the absolute northernmost tip of the Philippine archipelago.
Right, and that geographic placement is everything. I mean, you are sitting out in the middle of incredibly dynamic, high-stakes waters. It's this volcanic, really raw landscape.
To put the geography into perspective for you, you are literally closer to the southern coast of Taiwan than you are to the Philippine capital of Manila.
Which is wild to think about.
It's insane. It is so isolated and honestly so strategically positioned that just recently, in May 2026, U.S. and Philippine forces actually deployed anti-ship missile systems there for military exercises.
Yeah, they just have.
So you're looking at a destination that balances this staggering, untouched beauty with some of the most intense geopolitical tension on the planet right now.
Exactly. And the overarching theme we're going to explore today, the current that really runs beneath every single plane ticket price and guest house booking we discuss, is tension. It's this tension between an isolated ancient culture just trying to maintain its rhythm and the imminent threat of global exposure.
Yeah.
I mean, Batanes is a place balancing right on the edge of the world's attention.
Okay, let's unpack this, because whether you are scouting out travel trends before they just explode, or you're just insanely curious about how a completely isolated microeconomy functions, the numbers here are a great place to start.
They really are.
And they are completely antithetical to normal tourism metrics.
Oh, they defy almost every single trend in modern Southeast Asian travel. So, Batanes is an entire province made up of 10 islands.
Right.
But only 3 of them are actually inhabited. You have Batan, which serves as the main island in the capital. Then there's Sabtang, which is deeply preserved and kind of acts as the cultural center. And finally, Itbayat.
Wow, okay.
Across that entire province, the resident population hovers between 18,000 and 20,000 people.
That is essentially the population of, like, a modest university campus.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's spread across islands separated by violent ocean currents.
And the tourism numbers reflect that bottleneck completely. The islands see fewer than 40,000 visitors in an entire calendar year.
Wait, 40,000 for the whole year?
Yep, the entire year.
Let's frame that 40,000 number against the rest of the region so you can really picture the scale of this. Boracay, which is that famous white sand party island in the central Philippines.
Yeah, everyone knows Boracay.
Right. Boracay absorbs roughly 2 million tourists a year. And then Palawan's El Nido, famous for those towering limestone formations, they process over 400,000 annual arrivals.
That's a massive difference.
So 40,000 tourists across an entire year for Batanes is basically the equivalent of a busy holiday weekend in Boracay.
Exactly. But the low volume is deeply intentional. For the last 2 decades, the provincial government has consciously chosen this low-impact, high-value tourism model.
Makes sense.
They recognized early on that their infrastructure just could not handle a surge. So they never chased that backpacker volume that places like Thailand or Vietnam did.
Right. They didn't want the banana pancake trail.
Exactly. However, maintaining that deliberate isolation is becoming nearly impossible right now, especially when you factor in places like Itbayat.
Yeah, Itbayat represents the absolute extreme of this isolation. It is the northernmost inhabited island in the chain, sitting just 155 kilometers from Taiwan.
It's so far out there.
And there is no commercial airport there for tourists. You can literally only reach it by boat, crossing a stretch of water that is notorious for unpredictable, heavy swells.
The geographical isolation of Itbayat is profound.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is how that physical isolation is suddenly colliding with unprecedented global visibility. We are seeing a massive sense of urgency around visiting Batanes, specifically right now in 2026.
Right.
And it stems from a few converging factors.
The most immediate factor is the geopolitical reality. Batanes has effectively become ground zero for the China-Taiwan contingency theater.
Yeah, throughout late 2025 and early 2026, international policy think tanks, like the Lowy Institute in Australia, alongside major global news networks like Reuters and DW News, they all started running these massive, highly detailed features on Batanes.
Right, it was everywhere.
They were mapping out the topography, discussing the strategic value of the Bashi Channel, interviewing locals, all of it.
Now, to be incredibly clear to you listening, our purpose today is not to endorse or debate the geopolitical strategies of any nation involved.
No, absolutely not.
Our job is solely to analyze how these events impact a traveler trying to navigate the region. And from a pure travel perspective, having major news desks broadcasting the existence of these remote islands to the whole world creates a massive ripple effect.
Oh, totally. Historical tourism data shows a very predictable pattern here.
Yeah.
When global media heavily features a previously obscure remote area, even if the coverage is purely political or strategic,
Right.
a wave of curiosity-driven tourism inevitably follows within 12 to 24 months.
Human nature, right.
Exactly. The global spotlight inadvertently acts as a massive marketing campaign. And Batanes simply does not have the roads, the plumbing, or the hospitality workforce to absorb the surge that usually follows that kind of visibility.
It kind of reminds me of the life cycle of an incredible, obscure indie band.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Right, like you find them and they are playing these intimate 200-person venues. The acoustics are raw, you can talk to the band after the show. The experience is deeply personal.
Yeah.
But then they win a Grammy. The global spotlight hits them. Suddenly they're booked for stadium tours, the ticket prices decouple, you are watching them on a jumbotron from a half-mile away, and that original, intimate vibe is permanently gone.
That is so true.
Batanes is sitting in that narrow window right before the stadium tour begins.
That analogy perfectly captures the closing window of opportunity. And adding to that pressure is a bureaucratic development regarding UNESCO.
Oh, right, the heritage list.
Yeah, Batanes has been sitting on the UNESCO World Heritage tentative list since 1993. That is 33 years of waiting.
Why does it take over 3 decades to get something approved? I mean, that seems excessive.
Well, creating a successful UNESCO dossier requires a monumental amount of municipal resources. You have to meticulously catalog the architecture, prove the historical continuous use of the land, and create binding legal frameworks for preservation.
That's a lot of paperwork.
And for a province with only 20,000 people and a tiny tax base, that bureaucratic burden is just immense. But recently, a highly organized, freshly funded push has mobilized to finally get the islands officially inscribed.
So if that official World Heritage status actually comes through, how does that practically change the trip for someone trying to visit?
It changes the fundamental mechanics of access completely. Once a fragile environment gets UNESCO status, the immediate administrative response to protect it is usually the implementation of strict permit caps.
Ah, okay.
Think of the Galapagos Islands or Machu Picchu. You will no longer be competing just for a plane ticket. You will be entering a lottery or booking a year in advance just to secure a government permit to step foot in the villages. The barrier shifts from being purely logistical to being heavily bureaucratic.
There is one more structural change threatening to blow the doors open, and that is the airport in the capital town of Basco. Currently, the runway is quite short and constrained by the mountains and the ocean. It can only physically accommodate small, propeller-driven aircraft.
And those propeller planes are the natural bottleneck saving the islands right now.
Right.
But the Philippine government is currently engaged in deep discussions regarding domestic airfare subsidies and capacity reform. If they find a way to engineer an expansion to that runway or heavily subsidize more frequent flights, the economic and logistical barriers to entry vanish almost overnight.
The bottleneck just breaks.
Completely.
But while we look at global news, UNESCO permits, and runway expansions as these looming future threats, the briefing points out a much more immediate physical enforcer that dictates exactly who can visit Batanes today.
Yeah, the one that's already there.
Right, and that is the extreme weather.
The weather is not just a background element in Batanes. It is the central organizing principle of human existence there. The province sits squarely in the most typhoon-exposed region of the Philippines.
Okay.
It's directly in the path of cyclonic storms forming in the Pacific and tracking northwest toward Taiwan and Japan.
The data in the briefing is staggering. They average 12 to 15 typhoons a single year.
Yeah, let that sink in.
Trying to conceptualize living through a dozen massive storm systems annually completely reframes how you look at the island's infrastructure.
You see the adaptation to that brutal environment written directly into the architecture. The traditional Ivatan stone houses are marvels of indigenous engineering.
It's beautiful.
They source limestone, burn it in traditional kilns to create lime mortar, and construct walls that are quite literally a full meter thick.
Wait, a 3-foot thick wall for a residential house?
Exactly. And they top those massive walls with heavily vaulted roofs made of layers of kogan grass. The roofs are aerodynamically sloped and deeply anchored into the stone, so the wind simply rushes over them.
That's brilliant.
They're basically constructing fortresses to survive sustained, devastating winds that would completely obliterate the conventional cinder block and tin roof housing you see in the rest of the country.
Because the weather is so uncompromising, you cannot just blindly throw a dart at a calendar and book a vacation. The sources outline an incredibly narrow, specific window for a successful trip.
Yeah, you have to get the timing right. The optimal window opens in mid-February and shuts abruptly in late May. Within that time frame, the absolute sweet spot is March, April, and early May.
Okay, so what changes during those 3 specific months?
The atmospheric pressure stabilizes. You get dependably clear skies. Crucially, the ocean swells drop enough that the inter-island passenger ferries, especially the vital link to Sabtang Island, can operate on a reliable schedule.
Oh, that makes a huge difference.
Plus, the famous rolling pastures are lush and green, offering the landscape photography people expect.
And the red zone months. The times you should absolutely cross off your list.
July through October is the peak of typhoon season. Booking a leisure trip, then, is a profound mistake. Your flights will likely cancel, you will be physically confined to your guest house due to dangerous winds, and the scenic landscapes turn into hazard zones.
Yikes.
Additionally, the period from November through January presents a different kind of challenge. It becomes very cold by Philippine standards, the wind is relentless, the skies are perpetually gray, and the rough seas mean inter-island travel is frequently suspended.
Let me pose a scenario based on that. Say you are planning a massive multi-week tour of the Philippines. You are flying in from Toronto or London.
Okay, big international trip.
Exactly. You want to see the beaches in Palawan, the rice terraces in the north, and you want Batanes to be the grand finale of your trip. Does it make sense to put the most difficult logistical puzzle at the very end of your itinerary?
Doing that is arguably the single biggest planning error you can make.
Really?
The briefing is emphatic about this. Always put Batanes at the very beginning of your trip.
Walk us through the mechanics of why that matters so much.
It comes down to the cascading effects of a weather delay. If you put Batanes at the end of your trip and a sudden storm rolls in, your small propeller flight out of Basco will be canceled.
Right.
If you cannot leave Basco, you miss your connection in Manila. If you miss your connection in Manila, you miss your expensive, long-haul international flight back to Toronto, you are out thousands of dollars.
That is a nightmare, but if you put it at the front...
Right, if Batanes is the first stop and you get delayed flying out, the worst consequence is that you are stuck in a beautiful stonehouse village for 2 extra days.
Not the worst place to be stuck.
Exactly. You might have to eat the cost of a domestic flight down to Palawan, but rebooking a $50 domestic hopper is vastly less stressful than trying to rebook a Trans-Pacific flight at the last minute.
That makes perfect sense. Control the risk where it is cheapest. Now, going back to the numbers for a second. With only 40,000 tourists a year, we're obviously not dealing with the kind of crushing crowds you see at the Trevi Fountain or in Bali. So, does a traveler even need to worry about availability?
They absolutely do, but for the exact opposite reason.
What do you mean?
The issue in Batanes isn't mass tourism overcrowding. It is a profound lack of supply. The infrastructure is microscopic. There are so few touring fans, so few certified guides, and so few quality rooms that the math gets very tight very fast.
How tight are we talking?
The sources indicate that a simultaneous, uncoordinated arrival of just 20 travelers can completely exhaust the available transport and premium accommodation for the day.
Wait, 20 people?
Just 20 people. If 20 people land on a morning flight without prearranging their logistics, every private van is instantly booked, and every mid-range bed is taken.
20 people crashing the system is wild. It means spontaneity is basically a liability here.
Oh, spontaneity will leave you stranded at the airport terminal trying to find a tricycle driver to take you to a homestay that might not have power, Pre-booking your accommodation and your van tours 3 to 4 weeks in advance during that March to May peak season is a non-negotiable requirement for a smooth trip.
Beyond the weather and the limited vans, we also have to address the psychological atmosphere on the ground right now, in May 2026. If you manage to book a trip, what is the actual vibe in the villages, given the geopolitical tension we discussed earlier?
The briefing documents detail the ground truth very neutrally. Currently, the military exercises and anti-ship missile deployments are strictly contained to non-civilian zones.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, they are heavily concentrated on Mavulis, which is a completely uninhabited island at the extreme north of the chain, as well as on the rugged, inaccessible northern coast of Ivatan.
So tourists aren't seeing military hardware rolling through the town squares?
No, not at all. The primary tourist areas, Basco Town, the rolling hills of Batan, the heritage villages of Soptang, remain entirely civilian spaces. Life looks exactly as it did 10 years ago.
Okay.
However, the local populace is highly aware of the shift. Fishermen returning to port frequently report sightings of foreign vessels operating in the Bashi Channel. The geopolitical reality operates as this constant, low-level background noise.
For some travelers, sitting in a 300-year-old village while geopolitical history unfolds just over the horizon makes the trip feel incredibly significant.
Yeah, definitely.
But for others, it completely shatters the illusion of a relaxing escape. Knowing that context and having navigated the narrow booking window, let's look at the physical experience of actually arriving. What does that first hour in Batanes feel like?
The arrival sequence is jarring in the best possible way.
How so?
The journey begins on an ATR-72, which is a specialized 42-seat twin-engine turboprop plane, usually operated by Philippine Airlines or Cebu Pacific. As the plane descends through the cloud layer, the visual disconnect hits you instantly.
Because you've spent the last few days in Manila sweating in 90-degree tropical heat, surrounded by palm trees and concrete. But when you look out the window of this propeller plane, you do not see the tropics.
You don't. You see a landscape that immediately evokes the Scottish Highlands or the Azores in the mid-Atlantic or the western coast of Ireland.
That's so unexpected.
It is. It's temperate, heavily windswept, and dominated by dramatic, sheer cliffs dropping into crashing ocean surf, all covered in deep green pastures.
The sensory shift is massive. And then you touch down at Basco Airport, which is a masterclass in minimalism.
The terminal building is literally a single room.
One room.
One room. You disembark onto the tarmac, feel that cool ocean wind, collect your luggage directly from a metal pushcart, and walk through a simple bamboo gate to exit the airport.
No baggage carousels breaking down, no duty-free perfume mazes to navigate, just a bamboo gate.
Yeah, just a bamboo gate.
And right there at the exit, you handle the entry bureaucracy, which is incredibly straightforward and affordable.
It is. Every visitor is required to pay 2 local fees upon arrival. There is a 100 Philippine peso registration fee and a 350 peso environmental fee. So for roughly $8 you are fully registered and contributing to the conservation of the province.
Once you pay your $8 and head into Basco Town, the capital, the briefing notes that travelers often experience a strange sense of disorientation for the first few hours.
The disorientation stems from an absence of typical Southeast Asian tourist infrastructure. When you walk through Basco, there are no aggressive hawkers trying to sell you island hopping packages.
Right.
There are no neon-lit strips of bars blasting DJ sets. There is no hustle. The pacing of daily life is dictated by the sun and the weather, not by commerce.
If you are coming off a high-stress corporate job or you just fought your way through Manila traffic, your nervous system is braced for chaos. When the chaos doesn't arrive, it feels weird.
It takes a minute to adjust, for sure.
But the sources point out that once you take the 10-minute walk from the center of town up the hill to the Basco Lighthouse, and you look out over the expanse of the Bashi Channel, that disorientation dissolves into a deep sense of restoration.
The lack of commercialization acts as an immediate psychological filter. Travelers who require constant external stimulation, beach clubs, shopping districts, curated entertainment, realize very quickly that Batanes cannot provide that.
Yeah, wrong destination for them.
But travelers seeking authenticity, deep quiet, and a sense of scale against nature realize they have found something exceedingly rare.
So you've absorbed the quiet, you have paid your fees, and now you need a place to sleep. The accommodation landscape here does not rely on massive international hotel chains.
Definitely not.
Instead, the briefing outlines 4 very distinct tiers of lodging, and the tier you choose fundamentally dictates the flavor of your entire trip. Let's break down the economics and the experience of each.
The foundational tier, The backbone of the entire local tourism economy is the homestay guest house. These run roughly between 25 and 45 US dollars a night. A prominent example highlighted in the briefing is the Batanes Seaside Lodge, which operates right around the $30 mark.
Okay, so what are the mechanics of a $30 stay in this kind of remote environment?
You are renting a simple, immaculately clean room within a local family's property. The bathroom is often shared, though newer setups might offer a private bath. A crucial value add is that the rate almost always includes a home-cooked local breakfast. Beyond the bed and the food, staying in a homestay integrates you directly into the community network. The family hosting you will usually be the ones arranging your van hire and connecting you with local guides.
Stepping up one level, we get to the mid-range guest houses. These demand a premium, running between 55 and 85 US dollars a night. The Ivatan Heritage Lodging is cited as a benchmark for this category. What is driving that price jump?
The premium buys you guaranteed privacy and climate control. You get an ensuite bathroom and, importantly, air conditioning.
Oh, AC is nice.
It is. While the evenings in Batanes are cool and temperate, daytime humidity during the warmer months can still be intense, and having AC to retreat to is a major comfort upgrade.
And there is an architectural element to this mid-range tier that is really interesting.
Yeah, there's a strong commitment to architectural fidelity. In many developing tourist markets, mid-range hotels default to a cheap, generic, concrete block aesthetic.
We've all seen those.
Right. But in Batanes, properties like the Ivatan Heritage Lodging heavily incorporate the traditional stonehouse style. They use local limestone and wood, ensuring that even as tourism develops, the visual identity of the towns remains intact.
The third tier moves us into high-end territory, the boutique eco-lodges. Now, the term boutique can be misleading. We are not talking about overwater bungalows with glass floors and infinity pools.
Far from it. These lodges, which price out between $100 and $150 US dollars a night, represent rugged, honest luxury. Shane Deck's Seaside Accommodations is a prime example.
Okay.
The luxury here is defined by location and exclusivity. You are paying for elevated, unobstructed views of the cliffs, expansive private terraces, and profound silence.
And because we established earlier that building anything here requires shipping materials across volatile oceans, creating an eco-lodge with high-end finishing is a massive logistical triumph.
It really is.
That effort is baked into the $150 price tag. And because there are so few of these premium rooms, you're looking at a minimum 4 to 6 week advance booking requirement.
Finally, we reach the fourth tier, which operates less like a hotel category and more like an expedition class. The Ivatan Island accommodations.
This is where the travel gets genuinely frontier.
Oh, absolutely. Staying on Ivatan costs between 20 and 35 US dollars a night. You are sleeping in very basic community-run guest houses. The island relies entirely on diesel generators for power, meaning scheduled and unscheduled electricity cuts are a daily reality.
And just physically getting to the bed you paid $20 for requires enduring a brutal 3 to 4 hour boat, crossing over open, heaving ocean swells, entirely dependent on weather windows rather than a fixed timetable.
The briefing describes Ivatan as the ultimate litmus test for a traveler's temperament.
I found that psychological profiling fascinating. If you are a resilient, flexible traveler who understands that ocean conditions overrule your itinerary, spending a night powered by a generator in a town most humans will never see becomes the defining highlight of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
The flip side of that is the rigid planner. If you demand a hot shower at a specific time and spiral into anxiety when a boat is delayed by 48 hours, Ivatan will mentally break you. It reveals exactly how much control you truly need.
It strips away all the padding of the modern travel industry. Speaking of basic needs, once you drop your bags at your guest house or eco-lodge, the very next logistical hurdle you face is sustenance. Feeding yourself on an isolated island requires understanding a completely different kind of supply chain.
The food in Batanes is not about chasing Michelin stars. It is a direct reflection of survival in a harsh environment. The menu is dictated by what the volcanic soil can grow and what the turbulent ocean will yield.
The traditional Ivatan diet is built on resilience. The absolute staple, the signature dish you will encounter everywhere, is called uved.
Uved, right.
These are dense, savory meatballs made by mixing ground pork with grated taro root, locally referred to as gabi. Taro grows well in the rocky, wind-battered soil where more delicate crops would fail. You will find uved served in both the small local eateries and the mid-range guest houses.
Another famous but highly controversial local protein is the coconut crab, known locally as tatus.
The tatus is a massive terrestrial crab that physically climbs trees to harvest coconuts. Historically, it was a major protein source. However, the briefing contains a very specific, firm warning regarding etiquette and sustainability.
So what is the rule for travelers?
The coconut crab population is in severe decline due to overharvesting and environmental pressure. The established etiquette is clear. If a local family invites you into their home and generously offers you tatus, it is respectful to accept and eat it.
Okay.
But as a tourist with purchasing power, you should never actively seek it out, demand it at restaurants, or try to buy it in the markets. Tourist demand directly drives commercial poaching, which the local government is desperately trying to curb.
It is a simple concept. Do not use your dollars to accelerate the extinction of a local species. Instead, direct your budget toward the sustainable marine harvest, specifically the flying fish, or debang.
Debong season runs from February through June, perfectly aligning with the optimal tourist window. The local fishermen pull staggering amounts of flying fish from the ocean, and the economics of it are incredible for a traveler.
Let's look at the market prices.
If you visit the local markets, you can purchase a bundle of dried debang for roughly 50 to 80 Philippine pesos, which translates to about 85 cents to $1.40 in U.S. currency.
Wow, that's cheap.
If you want fresh, whole flying fish, it runs 80 to 120 pesos per kilogram, so a maximum of about 2.10 U.S. dollars for over 2 pounds of fresh protein.
Those raw ingredient prices are incredible. But for the vast majority of travelers who do not have access to a kitchen in their guest house, what does it cost to simply sit down and order a cooked meal?
Dining out at a carinderia, a small, local, family-run eatery, remains highly affordable. A full meal consisting of rice, a vegetable, and a local protein will cost between $4 and $8 U.S. dollars.
That's really good.
A cup of local coffee runs $1.50 to $2.50. And if you want a beer at the end of the day, a can of San Miguel, which is practically the only brand available, costs about $105 to $140 U.S. dollars.
Now, here is where the economic reality of isolation really hits. Those restaurant prices are great. But if you walk into a grocery store in Basco planning to buy imported snacks or familiar comfort foods, you are going to experience serious sticker shock.
Oh, yeah. The grocery markup is a masterclass in supply chain economics. Imagine the logistics required to get a simple 50-kilo sack of flour from a farm in the central Philippines to a shelf in Basco.
Sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
It has to be trucked to a port in Manila, loaded onto a cargo ship, sailed up the coast, transferred, and then navigated through the unpredictable, often violent swells of the Bashi Channel before being offloaded by hand.
Every single mile of that ocean journey adds risk and fuel costs, and the consumer pays for it.
The result is an automatic 30 to 50% price premium on all imported grocery goods compared to mainland prices. A standard loaf of sliced bread, which might cost 80 cents in Manila, jumps to $1.20 or $1.40 in Batanes.
Wow.
Furthermore, you must abandon any expectation of global food infrastructure. There are 0 international fast food chains. There are no global coffee franchises. The local supply chain is all there is.
When we synthesize all of that, the cheap local fish and the expensive imported bread, what does a realistic daily food budget look like?
If you are disciplined and eat strictly at the local carinderias, budgeting 12 to 18 U.S. dollars a day is completely viable. If you prefer the convenience of eating your meals at your mid-range guest house or eco-lodge, the daily food cost shifts between 20 and 30 U.S. dollars.
While we are discussing interacting with local eateries and markets, the briefing dedicates a significant section to local etiquette. The Ivatan people have survived centuries of brutal weather through intense community cooperation, and that history has shaped a very specific social demeanor.
Yes, the Ivatan culture is profoundly communal, yet socially reserved. They are quiet, dignified, and highly observant. Because of this, certain behaviors common in backpacker hubs are deeply resented here.
Give us the specifics on what to avoid.
First, loud, boisterous public behavior is viewed as highly disrespectful. The baseline volume of the island is low, and tourists are expected to match it. Second, the traditional stone houses are private family compounds, not museum exhibits. Wandering into a courtyard uninvited to take a look at the architecture is a massive violation of privacy.
It seems obvious, but when people see a 300-year-old grass roof, they sometimes forget real families are eating dinner inside.
Precisely. And third, photography requires consent, particularly with the village elders. Thrusting a camera into the face of an older woman wearing traditional garments without initiating a polite conversation and asking for explicit permission is universally condemned by the locals.
Treat people with baseline human respect. Ask permission. The sources also highlight a crucial financial courtesy regarding the local van drivers.
Transport rates for van tours are strictly fixed by a local driver's cooperative, which prevents price gouging. However, those fixed rates do not fully account for the extreme wear and tear the rugged, unpaved coastal roads inflict on tires and suspensions.
Right, the roads are tough.
These drivers are usually operating their own family vehicles. Tipping your driver at the end of the day is a highly encouraged practice to help offset those brutal maintenance costs.
Let's take all of these moving parts, the flights, the eco-lodges, the $4 meals, the van tips, and build out the total financial picture. If a listener is sitting down to budget this trip, what does the daily burn rate actually look like?
Getting to the island is your first major hurdle. Let's use an international baseline. If you were flying out of Sydney, Australia, for instance, purchasing your international ticket to Manila plus the required domestic round-trip flights up to Basco, it'll cost between $900 and $1,050 total.
Once you are physically on the island, the briefing divides the expenses into 3 distinct traveler profiles. Let's look at the absolute minimum required to pull this off the low-tier budget.
The low tier operates on roughly $65 a day. That budget assumes you are staying in a $30 homestay with breakfast included. You are eating exclusively at the $4 carinderias.
Okay.
For transport, you are utilizing shared van tours, which divides the daily rate among several strangers, bringing your personal cost down to about $12 or $15 a day. And you're utilizing the cheap $4 public ferry to Sabtang.
But operating on $65 a day here requires a massive trade-off in time and autonomy. You are at the mercy of group logistics. You have to wait around until the homestay owner can find 4 other tourists to fill the van before you can leave. You are eating whatever the local eatery managed to source that morning.
It requires deep patience. However, backpackers who successfully navigate this tier report an immense sense of value. Paying $65 a day to hike pristine, temperate cliffs, completely devoid of other tourists, is a return on investment you cannot replicate anywhere else in the Asian market.
If you have a bit more capital and want to reclaim your time, you move up to the mid-tier.
The mid-tier is calibrated at $130 a day. At this level, you upgrade to a $65 or $75 mid-range room with air conditioning and a private bath. You allocate $30 a day for higher quality meals at the guest houses. And the biggest shift, you hire a private van for your tours.
How does the van math work?
A private van costs between $45 and $60 for the entire day. If you are traveling as a couple, you split that cost. This $130 tier is the absolute sweet spot for Batanes.
It sounds ideal.
It provides comfort, but more importantly, it buys you total control over your schedule. You can linger at the lighthouse for 2 hours if you want, without inconveniencing a group of strangers.
Then we have the high tier, coming in at $210 a day.
At $210 a day, you are booking the $150 Eco Lodge. You retain the private van, you consume the best food available on the island, and you hire specialized local guides for deep dive heritage walks, which run $25 to $40 a session.
But we need to manage expectations for the luxury traveler. Spending over $200 a day in a developing country usually buys you opulent 5-star resort amenities.
Not here. Dropping $210 a day in Batanes does not buy you a sprawling spa, a concierge, or an infinity pool. It buys you profound silence, deep cultural access, and absolute architectural privacy. The luxury is the environment itself.
Now let's look at the family dynamic. If a listener wants to bring their spouse and 2 kids for a 5-night vacation, what is the damage?
A family of 4 staying for 5 nights should budget between $2,800 and $3,200.
That is incredibly steep for a 5-day domestic trip within Southeast Asia. Where's all that money going?
The domestic flights are the primary culprit. Purchasing 4 round-trip tickets on those small propeller planes from Manila to Basco will consume between $720 and $1,000 before you even book a hotel.
Wow.
Add the necessity of a family suite or 2 separate rooms, plus the daily private van hire, and the costs compound rapidly.
We have covered the backpacker, the couple, and the family. But there is one very specific, very modern demographic we need to address: the digital nomad. Let's say I want to slow travel. I want to rent a guest house for a month, buy a local SIM card, sit on a balcony overlooking the ocean, and work remotely.
The briefing provides a categorical, emphatic no to this plan. Batanes is fundamentally hostile to the digital nomad infrastructure.
Walk us through the technical failures of trying to work there.
It is a trifecta of logistical failure for remote work. First, the telecommunications infrastructure relies on satellite and microwave links that are notoriously slow and highly vulnerable to weather disruption. A Zoom call is nearly impossible.
Right.
Second, the power grid is fragile. Rolling blackouts and scheduled generator maintenance will instantly kill your workflow.
Also bad.
Third, the economics make no sense. Trying to negotiate a month-long rate for a mid-range room will still cost you $900 to $1,200 US, which is exorbitant for a location where you cannot reliably access the internet.
The infrastructure of the island is engineered to support fishing, agriculture, and survival. It is not engineered to support tech workers. You visit Batanes, you do not base yourself there.
That is the perfect distinction. Now, assume you are not a digital nomad. Assume you are a well-prepared mid-tier traveler. You have your $130 daily budget perfectly allocated in a spreadsheet. You understand the weather windows. You feel completely in control.
That feeling of control is exactly what sets you up for failure.
We operate with the modern assumption that travel is an on-demand commodity. We expect instant booking confirmations, rigid transit schedules, and seamless transition.
Yeah, that's what we're used to.
Batanes requires you to systematically dismantle that expectation. You have to submit to local monopolies and environmental chaos. And that brings us to the three major logistics traps that routinely ruin carefully planned spreadsheets.
Trap number 1 is the most notorious, and it sounds incredibly stressful. The Basco airport weather cancellation spiral.
The mechanism driving this trap is the intersection of aviation limitations and geography. As we established, Basco Airport operates with a very short runway tucked between the mountains and the sea, which dictates the use of those ATR-72 propeller planes.
Why are propeller planes specifically a liability here?
Propeller aircraft have vastly lower operational thresholds for crosswinds compared to modern passenger jets. A moderate 25-knot crosswind blowing off the Basco Channel would not even warrant a delay announcement for a Boeing 737 in Manila.
Really? Just a breeze for a big plane.
Exactly. But in Basco, that exact same wind speed exceeds the safety parameters of the ATR-72, forcing an immediate flight cancellation.
And the data shows this isn't a rare occurrence. If you attempt to fly during the shoulder seasons, late May, June, or October, the historical cancellation rate spikes to between 30 and 40%. Almost half of the scheduled flights simply do not take off.
This creates the spiral. Imagine you are scheduled to fly from Basco to Manila on a Tuesday morning, and your long-haul flight back to London departs Manila on Tuesday night.
Okay, picturing it.
If a crosswind grounds your Basco flight, you miss your connection. The cascade effect means you lose your international ticket, and because the delay was weather-related, the airline is often not liable to rebook your trans-Pacific leg for free. Tourists frequently find themselves financially devastated by this sequence.
How does a traveler practically firewall their itinerary against this spiral?
2 mandatory steps. First, build a massive buffer into your schedule. Never, under any circumstances, fly out of Basco on the same day or even the day before your international departure. You must schedule a minimum 2-night buffer in Manila at the end of your trip.
2 nights, minimum. Got it.
Second, you must purchase comprehensive travel insurance that specifically covers trip disruption or trip delay. You need a policy that pays for your extra hotel nights and meals when you are stranded on the island, not just a policy that refunds a $100 domestic flight.
That leads us to the second major hazard, which the briefing calls the Sabteng Ferry false confidence trap.
To understand this trap, you have to look at the oceanography of the Basco Channel. The waterway separating the main island of Batan from the heritage island of Sabteng is a collision zone for massive ocean currents.
But if you go on social media and watch travel vloggers going to Sabteng, they invariably show footage of a tranquil 30-minute crossing on a charming wooden outrigger boat.
That footage creates the false confidence. The vloggers only film when the weather is perfect. The daily reality is that the ferry, which theoretically operates on a schedule of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. departures, suspends operations constantly. The Port Authority will shut down crossings for 48 to 72 hours if the swells get too high.
How does this trap a traveler?
A tourist will wake up in Basco, see the sun shining, and decide to take the 7 a.m. ferry over to Sabteng for a day trip, fully intending to catch the afternoon ferry back to their comfortable hotel.
Makes sense.
But while they're spending 4 hours walking around the stone villages, a low-pressure system moves in. The wind accelerates, the channel turns violent, and the Coast Guard cancels the afternoon return ferry.
And suddenly, you are physically stranded on a tiny island with almost zero commercial infrastructure, and you have no hotel booking.
You join a dozen other stranded tourists trying to find a mattress on the floor of a homestay or sleeping in the Port Authority building. The fix for this is incredibly simple but crucial. Always book one insurance night on Sabteng in advance.
Explain the logic of the insurance night.
You intentionally pay $30 for a basic homestay room on Sabteng, even if you plan to return to Basco that afternoon. If the weather holds and you catch the return ferry, you simply walk away from the $30 booking. You treat it as a sunk cost.
Right.
If the weather turns and the boats are grounded, you are the only tourist on the island with a guaranteed bed, a roof, and a local family to cook for you, while everyone else scrambles in a panic.
Spending $30 to guarantee peace of mind is the best investment you can make. The third logistics trap moves away from weather and focuses purely on economics. The van tour monopoly price lock.
The mechanism here is a completely closed transit ecosystem. If you want to leave the capital town of Basco, there are no ride-sharing apps. Grab and Uber do not exist. You cannot legally rent a motorcycle as a foreign tourist because the liability issues with the rugged roads are too complex. Local tricycles are restricted to the immediate vicinity of the town.
So if you want to see the famous Marlborough Holes in the south or get to the ferry port, you are entirely dependent on hiring a local van.
And the van market operates as a strict cooperative. The prices are non-negotiable and set in stone by the association. A tour of North Bataan is fixed at 2,500 pesos, roughly 44 US dollars. The extended South Bataan tour is 3,500 pesos, about 61 US dollars.
Knowing the price is fixed actually sounds less stressful than having to haggle with taxi drivers. Where is the trap?
The trap is availability, not price. Because the prices are fixed, you cannot use extra money to secure a van at the last minute. If you wait until you land in Basco to try and organize your tours, especially during the April peak season, you will discover that every single van in the cooperative has already been claimed by the guest houses for their pre-booked guests.
You have the money, but the supply is zero.
Exactly. You will have a list of incredible sites you want to photograph and absolutely no physical mechanism to reach them. The solution is to bundle your logistics. The very moment you email a guest house to secure your room, 4 to 6 weeks in advance, you must book your van tour in that exact same email. Lock up the asset before you ever step on the plane.
We have spent the last 20 minutes talking about surrendering control to volatile oceans, high winds, and remote isolation. Naturally, when people hear about that level of environmental chaos, their immediate follow-up question is about physical safety.
Assessing safety in Batanes requires splitting the concept into 3 distinct categories: criminal safety, environmental safety, and geopolitical safety.
Let's start with the baseline criminal element. Is it safe to walk around at night?
From a sociological standpoint, it is spectacularly safe. Violent crime, theft, and scams are practically non-existent. You're operating within a deeply interconnected community of 20,000 people. Anonymity does not exist. Everyone knows everyone else's family lineage.
The briefing emphasizes that solo female travelers consistently rate Batanes as one of the most psychologically comfortable destinations in Asia.
The vendor culture is entirely respectful. No one is sizing you up for a scam, and no one is aggressively catcalling or harassing tourists. The baseline societal trust is incredibly high.
So the threat is not human. The threat is the landscape.
The environmental risks are real and require constant vigilance. You are dealing with unfenced, sheer cliffs dropping hundreds of feet into the ocean. Rogue waves can easily sweep someone off the lower coastal rocks. The limestone paths, particularly on Ivatan, are highly unstable and slippery.
It requires the same mindset as visiting a rugged national park. You do not worry about a pickpocket stealing your camera. You worry about twisting an ankle on a remote trail just as a squall rolls in, knowing that medical evacuation is hours or days away.
Which leads us to the third safety category, the geopolitical elephant in the room. As of May 2026, with active military drills and missile deployments occurring in the province, is it fundamentally safe to travel there?
How does the briefing analyze the threat level?
The intelligence assessment concludes that, presently, yes, it is safe provided you travel with situational awareness. The military apparatus is intentionally isolated. The drills are localized to Mavulis and the extreme north of Ivatan, far from the civilian infrastructure.
Got it.
The immediate risk of tourists being caught in crossfire is practically zero.
But there is a broader operational risk if the geopolitical temperature rises.
The true risk lies in an escalation scenario. If the posturing in the Taiwan Strait rapidly deteriorates into an active incident, Batanes instantly becomes an operational military zone.
Right.
If that happens while you are vacationing there, the logistics of mass evacuation are a nightmare. You have a single short runway that would likely be requisitioned by the military, and no deep-water port capable of handling large evacuation vessels. You could be stranded in a conflict zone for weeks.
That is a sobering reality. You have to weigh that low-probability, high-consequence risk against your desire to see the islands. So, considering the staggering flight costs, the terrifying weather spirals, the ferry traps, and the geopolitical tension, what is the payoff? Why do people endure this gauntlet?
They endure the friction because the highlights are genuinely unparalleled in Southeast Asia. And the undisputed crown jewel of the entire province is Sabtang Island, specifically the heritage village of Xavian.
If you have ever seen a postcard or a documentary about Batanes, you have seen Xavian.
Xavian is a dense cluster of the traditional stone houses we discussed earlier, built directly into a hillside overlooking the ocean. Many of these limestone structures have stood continuously for 300 years.
300 years.
Yeah, when you walk through the narrow dirt alleys, you are experiencing an architectural timeline that has resisted centuries of typhoons and modernization.
And it is a living village, not a museum. The briefing notes the sensory details, the sound of the wind coming off the Bashi Channel, the smell of burning wood from the cooking fires, and the visual of local women wearing the vakul.
The vakul is a magnificent piece of functional clothing. It is a heavy woven headgear made from the shredded leaves of the local voivoi palm. It drapes down over the shoulders and acts as an incredibly effective, completely natural rain cape and sun shield.
That's so cool.
Seeing it worn practically in the fields connects you instantly to the ingenuity of the Ivatan people.
Moving back across the channel to the main island of Batan, the geography shifts dramatically. You have an area universally referred to as Marlborough Country.
The official name is Raku Apayaman, but it earned the Marlborough moniker because the sprawling, intensely green, hilly pastures look exactly like the cinematic backdrops of old Western commercials, or perhaps New Zealand.
Okay, I can picture that.
It is a massive communal pasture land where water buffalo and horses graze freely right up to the edge of sheer cliffs.
The sources claim that watching the sunrise illuminate that volcanic green terrain is an experience that landscape photographers will fly across the globe specifically to capture.
And complementing that are the Vayang rolling hills on the western side of the island. The visual drama there is created by the contrast. Impossibly soft, undulating green hills that abruptly terminate in violent, jagged cliffs plunging into the crashing surf below. It visually exceeds almost every expectation travelers bring with them.
The highs are clearly stratospheric, but a deep dive requires balanced analysis. What are the honest disappointments? Where does Batanes fail to deliver?
The most consistent source of frustration, particularly for seasoned international travelers, is the incredibly low culinary ceiling.
We talked about the cheap market fish and the $4 eateries, but if a traveler has a larger budget and wants a premium dining experience, what happens?
They hit a wall by day 3. If your travel joy is derived from culinary discovery, diverse tasting menus, or even just high-quality espresso, Batanes will test your patience. The agricultural limitations mean fresh, diverse vegetables are scarce.
Makes sense.
The supply chain makes importing premium ingredients impossible. And culturally, there is simply zero local ambition for high-end, curated gastronomy. Food is fuel here, not art.
What about the physical infrastructure outside of the hotels?
The banking infrastructure is a major pain point. Basco town essentially relies on a single major ATM network.
Wait, one ATM for an entire province?
There are a few machines, but they frequently run on the same network. And the logistics of getting physical cash across the ocean to restock those machines means they are frequently empty or out of service due to power fluctuations.
Oh, man.
Because almost no local vendors or tricycle drivers accept credit cards, cash is absolute king.
The trap there is obvious. If you arrive relying on your debit card and the ATM is broken for 4 days, you cannot buy food or pay your van driver. You are paralyzed.
The mandate is to withdraw a massive stack of Philippine pesos while you are still in Manila, enough to cover every single anticipated expense for your entire trip, and bring it with you in cash.
And finally, we have to mention the psychological weight. The military presence, while physically isolated, is emotionally pervasive. For travelers who go to remote islands specifically to disconnect from the exhausting global news cycle, being constantly reminded of a looming superpower conflict by the sight of distant patrol boats can ruin the mental escape.
What is crucial to understand is that these disappointments are inextricably bound to the highlights. There are two sides of the exact same coin.
Elaborate on that connection.
You cannot demand a deeply authentic, completely untouched 300-year-old stone village that exists entirely outside of modern time and simultaneously demand a street full of Michelin star restaurants backed by a flawless, high-speed fiber optic banking network.
That's a fair point.
The extreme isolation is the only thing that preserves the beauty of the villages. But that exact same isolation is what breaks the ATM and limits the food supply. The beauty and the friction are generated by the exact same geographic reality.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You cannot selectively extract the romance of isolation without accepting the inconvenience of it. But let's say a listener hears about the broken ATMs, the ferry cancellations, and the $1,000 family flight costs, and decides it is simply too much friction for a vacation. Does the briefing offer any alternatives that capture a similar vibe?
It does. The document outlines two highly specific alternatives that deliver a very similar emotional and visual register, but cater to different budgets and tolerance for chaos.
Alternative 1 keeps us in the Philippines. Camiguin Island.
Camiguin is a small, highly volcanic island located down in the southern Philippine region of Mindanao. It visually echoes Batanes in many ways. It features 4 massive volcanoes packed into a tiny area, creating dramatic topography, sunken cemeteries, and beautiful sandbars.
But the logistics of Camiguin are vastly more forgiving.
Immensely more forgiving. Because it is connected to the southern mainland ferry networks, the supply chain functions normally. You can fly round trip from Manila via Cebu for as little as $60 to $90 US.
That's cheaper.
The daily budget drops to a highly manageable $55 to $90 a day. The food culture is significantly more developed, offering great local and expat-run restaurants.
It sounds like a no-brainer, but if I can get dramatic volcanoes and quiet beaches in Camiguin for a fraction of the cost and zero logistical stress, why would I ever bother fighting my way to Batanes?
Because the emotional resonance is different. Camiguin is spectacularly beautiful, but it still feels fundamentally like a tropical Philippine island. It does not possess the ancient fortress-like Ivatan stone architecture.
True.
It does not have the jarring, temperate Scottish Highlands weather. And it does not offer that profound, visceral sensation of standing on the absolute edge of the earth, staring down at geopolitical frontier.
Camiguin is a beautiful vacation. Batanes is an expedition. Which brings us to Alternative 2, and geographically, this one sounds completely absurd at first glance. The Faroe Islands, located in the North Atlantic between Scotland and Iceland.
It seems like a massive geographic leap, but psychologically and visually, the Faroe Islands are the perfect comparative twin to Batanes. The traveler who enjoys standing in gale-force winds to look at sheer cliffs, ancient stone, and grass-roofed houses in the Philippines is the exact same traveler who books a ticket to the Faroes.
The visual register is identical, but the financial register is in another stratosphere.
The Faroes operate on a first-world Nordic economy. You were looking at a daily budget of $180 to $280 US, not including the $400, $600 flights just to get there from London.
What does that massive premium buy you?
It buys you absolute predictability. The Faroe Islands offer a highly polished, heavily engineered version of the raw landscape. The roads are flawless, the weather forecasting is scientifically precise, the rescue helicopters are on standby, and the culinary scene includes world-class multi-course tasting menus.
So, if you want the aesthetic of the raw frontier, but you demand the infrastructure of a modern European state, you pay the massive premium for the Faroes. If you want the chaotic, unpolished, truly isolated reality of that landscape, you fight your way to Batanes.
Precisely. The alternatives clarify exactly what Batanes is and what it isn't.
With all the evidence laid out, the costs, the weather traps, the architecture, the alternatives, we need to run this through our final verdict matrix. We are going to look at 5 distinct traveler profiles and render a definitive verdict. Is the ultimate logistical puzzle of the Philippines actually worth it? Let's start with the backpacker.
For the backpacker, the verdict is a conditional yes. If you possess the discipline to stick to the $65 a day homestay budget, Batanes offers you an absence of mass tourism that has been almost entirely eradicated from the rest of Southeast Asia. You are buying pure isolation.
But the condition?
The condition is flexibility. You must treat this as a slow, open-ended immersion. If you approach Batanes with the frantic energy of a 3-day island hop, the inevitable flight and ferry delays will destroy your trip.
Next, the mid-range traveler. The couple with a decent budget and a 2-week vacation.
This is a strong yes.
Yeah.
This tier unlocks the definitive Batanes experience. At $130 a day, securing a private van and an air-conditioned room, you buy enough comfort to absorb the logistical friction without stress.
Value for money?
Exactly. When you evaluate the value proposition, spending $130 a day here to have an entire volcanic cliffside to yourself, versus spending $130 a day to sit in gridlock traffic in Bali or fight for photo space in Santorini Batanes, offers an astronomically higher return on investment.
What about the family of 4? We established the costs are brutal.
The verdict here is possible, but proceed with caution. You have to swallow a $2,800 to $3,200 US price tag for 5 days. Beyond the money, the physical toll is high. It is a fantastic educational trip for teenagers who can handle long hikes and rough boat rides.
But for younger kids,
The weather cancellation trap makes it highly risky for small children. Being stranded in a one-room airport terminal for 48 hours with a 6-year-old and limited food options is a nightmare. If your kids are young, redirect that budget to the easier beaches of Palawan.
the luxury seeker, the traveler accustomed to five-star resorts.
Honest, no. If your baseline definition of a successful vacation requires a dedicated concierge, a day spa, and a curated wine list, cancel the trip immediately. Batanes cannot provide that.
Noted.
However, if you redefine luxury as exclusive, raw access to a landscape that money alone cannot instantly unlock, the $150 eco-lodges are deeply rewarding. But you must accept that once you leave the lodge, the unpaved roads and the violent ferry crossings are the exact same rough experience for the billionaire as they are for the backpackers. The environment bows to no one's wallet.
And finally, the digital nomad, the remote worker looking for a new background for their Zoom calls.
Categorical NO. As we dissected earlier, the infrastructure actively repels remote work. Take a week of actual vacation time, leave your laptop in Manila, and experience the landscape. Do not attempt to force a tech-dependent lifestyle onto an island engineered for survival.
Synthesizing all of that, the defining characteristic of Batanes is that it deeply rewards patience and violently punishes rigidity. You cannot outspend the weather. You have to respect the ocean, build your 2-day buffer in Manila, secure your van tours a month in advance, and then simply surrender to the rhythm of the province.
It is a profound, transformative experience if you approach it on its own terms. But analyzing all these documents leaves us with a much heavier, almost philosophical question to consider as we close.
What is the final thought for the listener?
As we look at the geopolitical reality of May 2026 and the looming threat of UNESCO permit caps, we have to ask ourselves about our own role in this ecosystem. When the world's last truly isolated, ancient places inevitably become the center of global friction and media attention, does traveling there serve as an act of preserving their culture? Or are we, simply by arriving, adding to the complication that destroys them?
That is exactly the kind of question you should be debating with yourself while you are standing up by the Basco lighthouse, listening to the wind and looking out over the Bashi Channel. It is a puzzle with no easy answers. If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.